I'm Norzie and this is Nightline News making the headlines. PM announces 100 million ringgit aid for flood-damaged homes and infrastructure. And 17 bodies found in Selangor after floods. Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob has asked the authorities concerned to speed up the payment of 1,000 ringgit aid to families affected by the devastating floods in several states. The Prime Minister said he raised this matter when chairing a special meeting with Mentris Besar of flood-hit states on Tuesday, which also discussed efforts to focus on post-flood operations.
Bila saya sebut 1,000 tadi ramai confused. Sama ada yang berpindah sahaja atau tidak. Saya sebut tadi yang terkesan. Yang terkesan bermakna yang berpindah dan yang tidak berpindah juga boleh mendapatkan RM1,000, tetapi perlu disertifai, disahkan oleh pejabat daerah, ya, mengesahkan bahawa mereka terkesan banjir.
The Prime Minister spoke to the media after visiting flood victims at the Dewan Besar di Suri Relief Centre in Jelebu Negeri Sembilan. The initial allocation of 100 million ringgit is for repairing bridges, roads and other infrastructure, including houses. At the same time, the government agreed to give 1,000 ringgit to each family. Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri also wants the cleaning up operations in the affected areas to be speeded up to facilitate the return of victims to their homes. The Prime Minister, meanwhile, did not deny weaknesses in the flood management, especially in Selangor. He assured that they will be improved from time to time. He said responsibility of managing flood disaster was not that of the federal governments alone, as the state governments and relevant authorities at the districts also play an important role.
Saya tidak menyalahkan netizen yang membuat aduan. Saya berterima kasih kepada netizen dan orang ramai yang terus mengadu kepada saya. Saya tidak pernah menafikan ada masalah kelewatan dan sebagainya. Tak ada. Saya tidak menafikan. Lewat dari segi memindahkan orang. Saya berada dengan pihak Angkatan Tentera di Putra Had memindahkan untuk perpindahan. Pukul 1:30 pagi saya ada kat situ. Dan saya dipahamkan tentera terus memindah sampai subuh baru hampir selesai. Jadi waktu tu aset-aset pun tidak dihantarkan dengan cepat kerana negeri-negeri lain pun memerlukan aset.
The number of deaths due to floods in Selangor has increased to 17, including a volunteer. Selangor Menteri Besar Datuk Sri Amiruddin Syahri said as of early Tuesday, 10 bodies were found in Klang, 3 in Hulu Langat and 4 in Sepang.
Namun begitu, daripada ke-17 kita sedang mengenal pasti punca kematian. Ada disebabkan kematian bukanlah disebabkan oleh kejadian banjir pesir. Mungkin kejadian daripada meninggal akibat kekurangan ubat dan sebagainya.
The state government, he said, would contribute 10,000 ringgit to each family who lost their loved ones in the floods and 1,000 ringgit to each family affected by it. He also said that in some districts, the flood water is still rising, like in Kuala Langat, Kuala Selangor and Sepang. Due to that, he said the number of flood victims in the state is expected to rise. So far, almost 31,000 victims had been evacuated to more than 200 relief centres. Meanwhile, the process of draining and channeling flood waters to nearby rivers and large ditches in the still deluged areas has begun with the use of water pumps. Selangor State Infrastructure and Agriculture Committee Chairman Izham Hashim said the state government had taken delivery of several water pumps from various sources, including the federal government and irrigation and drainage department of other states. He added the pumps were sent to places in dire need, such as Jalan Kebun Bunga, Batu Tiga and Taman Sri Muda. In the meantime, Izham said the cleanup operation was now focused on the post-flood areas, while evacuation work are being carried out in several places that had just experienced floods. The Mineral and Geoscience Department, JMG, has classified 122 slopes under its purview in the high-risk category. Its Director General, Hisamuddin Termidi, said the high-risk slopes were among 220 critical ones in residential areas and recreational sites nationwide. He said that some high-risk slopes were located in states affected by floods, including Kampung Sungai Penchala, which recorded a landslide incident on Monday morning.
Jadi saya nak sentuh sikitlah apa ni perkara tu kita cuba pantau. Setakat ni kita membuat pemantauan berkenaan dengan curun-curun tu lah.
Antara boleh tak bagi dalam beberapa
kawasan-kawasan penting. Ada beberapa, contohnya macam di Selangor yang kejadian bencana terutamanya banjir baru-baru ini. Contohnya macam di Sungai Penchala yang agak teruklah. Di Sungai Penchala, di Langat. Saya cuba cek kawasan ni, ya. Yang perlu diberi keutamaan.
Hisamuddin said this at the handing over of 2 tube wells and underground water filtration system by the Mineral and Geoscience Department to the Kedah government at the Tupah Water Treatment Plant in Merbuk, Kedah on Tuesday. On the proposal to install landslide early monitoring systems at high-risk slopes, Hisamuddin said his department is working with University Technology Malaysia. The Road Transport Department, RTD, will provide replacement documents at no charge for those affected by the recent floods in the country. Transport Minister Datuk Sri Wee Ka Siong said the documents include driving licenses, road tax discs and vehicle ownership certificates.
Adalah dibuat secara percuma. Kepada mangsa-mangsa banjir, mereka perlu buat laporan polis, tak payah tergesa-gesa. Mungkin dah selesaikan urusan ni, kita akan bagi setempoh dan mereka boleh datang menghubungi mana-mana cawangan JPJ. Ini kita akan edarkan pada pihak media.
He spoke to the media after the inaugural Kuala Lumpur International Logistics and Transport Excellence Awards ceremony on Tuesday. The Transport Minister added that a mobile RTD unit would be at affected flood areas and it would be more convenient for those affected to replace their documents. Maiden Muhammad Holdings Berhad, Maiden Managing Director Dato' Amir Ali Maiden said he forgave those who looted at its premises at Maiden Mart during the recent floods. He said he was deeply touched and sympathised with those affected by the floods, especially when the country was still struggling with the COVID-19 outbreak.
Sejujurnya, saya tidak menyokong perbuatan mencuri tersebut. Namun, dalam keadaan darurat, mungkin mereka tiada pilihan dan terpaksa melakukan perbuatan tersebut demi kelangsungan hidup. Dengan seikhlas hati, saya menghalalkan mereka.
The statement was issued in response to the break-in at Maiden Mart branch in Sri Muda Shah Alam. The Dewan Negara on Tuesday passed the 2022 budget. The bill was passed unanimously after the third reading by Finance Minister Datuk Sri Tengku Zafrul Abdul Aziz. The Supply Bill 2022 went through a period of 3 days of debate and winding up by 27 ministries after being tabled in the House on December 14. The bill was passed at committee level in the Dewan Rakyat on December 13th after a 13-day period of debate and winding up starting November 22nd for each ministry involved. The Dewan Rakyat approved the 2022 budget at the policy level on 18th November. The Dewan Negara also approved the Wildlife Conservation Amendment Bill 2021, which is more responsive to current needs in combating wildlife crime. The bill was passed with a more unanimous vote after the third reading by Energy and Natural Resources Deputy Minister Dato' Ali Biju after being debated by 7 senators.
Under a good government, a stable government, the economy can grow very fast. There are now 3 governments within a period of 3 years, 3 governments. Singapore insists that we should solve all the problems at the same time. Well, chopstick. Why should he say this thing about chopstick? Join me on Money Matters TV3.
Trailer driver charged over horror crash which killed 10 individuals. Details when we return. Malaysia's fiscal policy has been expansionary over the past 2 years and will continue to be so to ensure the well-being of Keluarga Malaysia. In line with the 12 Malaysia Plan, the initiatives under the 2022 budget also had focused on speeding up recovery, strengthening economic resilience and accelerating reforms.
As much as the government's short-term policies are important to drive our economic recovery in 2022, it is equally critical that we put in place medium and longer-term institutional reforms to strengthen our resilience. And indeed, other international organizations have plans.
Speaking at the launch of the World Bank Malaysia Economic Monitor report, Staying Afloat, Datuk Seri Mustafa also stressed the government remains committed to eliminating hardcore poverty by 2025. In making the measurement of multidimensional poverty more inclusive, the government would take into account the World Bank's suggestion of setting more ambitious income and non-income poverty indicators. Datuk Seri Mustafa added the government will adopt a holistic and targeted approach to eradicate hardcore poverty in about 50 localities throughout the country next year. Economic recovery in Malaysia is expected to gain momentum next year, with the World Bank projecting the GDP to grow by 5.8%, driven by an acceleration in private consumption. It said exports are projected to continue to expand, albeit at a slower pace, in line with the expected moderation in global trade growth. According to the latest World Bank Malaysia Economic Monitor report, the forecast for the year ahead follows growth estimates of 3.3% in 2021. It remains clouded by several downside risks, including new COVID-19 outbreaks and weaker than expected global and regional growth. Limited fiscal space remains a key challenge, whereby the federal government revenue, which has been declining since 2013, is projected to reach 14.3% of GDP in 2022.
Global growth, however, is projected to decelerate to 4.3% in 2022 from the 5.6% forecast in 2021. A trailer driver was charged with 10 counts of dangerous driving, which resulted in the death of 10 individuals, including a woman and her 8 children, in a tragic accident last Friday night.
Muhammad Rafi Jaafar, aged 37, pleaded not guilty to the charge read out to him before Judge Nur Faiza Abdul Sani at the Shah Alam Magistrates Court in Selangor. Rafi was accused of reckless or dangerous driving in causing the crash, which also involved 3 cars at kilometre 8.3 of the Elite Highway at about 12:02 a.m. on December 18th. He was charged under the Road Transport Act 1987, which carries a jail term of up to 10 years and a fine not exceeding 50,000 ringgit if convicted. The court set bail at 10,000 ringgit with the additional condition that his driving licence is suspended immediately. Rafi was also ordered to report to the nearest police station on the first week of every month and warned against disturbing any of the witnesses. The magistrate fixed January 27, 2022 for the case to be mentioned.
Police are actively tracking down a man of Rohingya descent known as Long Tiger, who reportedly escaped from the Tangkap Magistrates Court lockup in Johor recently. Deputy Inspector General of Police Datuk Sri Mazlan Lazim said all police chiefs at the state and district levels had also been alerted over the matter.
Dan kita telah maklumkan pada semua ketua-ketua polis dan juga ketua polis daerah serta ketua polis balai untuk mengesan Long Tiger ni. Jadi sehingga ke negeri yang border tu pun kita maklumkan untuk mengambil tindakan sewajarnya menangkap penjenayah yang lari semasa berada di negeri Johor, kontingen Johor tu.
Datuk Sri Mazlan said this at a media conference after a working visit to the Perlis Contingent Police Headquarters on Tuesday. The suspect had allegedly escaped from the Tangkap Magistrates Court in Johor at 11:55 a.m. on December 15th. Before the incident happened, the suspect arrived from Sungai Udang Prison in Malacca to the court for a trial under the Penal Code for extortion.
Omicron fear Thailand to reinstate mandatory quarantine. This and more from the Foreign Front when we return. Welcome back. The World Health Organization has urged people to cancel some of their holiday plans to protect public health as the Omicron variant spreads globally. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus stressed that an event cancelled is better than a life cancelled, adding that difficult decisions must be made.
Dr. Ghebreyesus said a number of countries have acted to try to halt the spread of the variant, including imposing travel curbs. In the US, Omicron is now dominant, accounting for 73% of new infections. President Joe Biden is expected to address the nation on Tuesday, but the White House said he was not planning on locking the country down. The country's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, earlier warned that Christmas travel would increase the spread of Omicron, even among the fully vaccinated. In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said on Monday that the government needed to reserve the possibility of bringing in new rules in England as Omicron cases surged, but did not announce further restrictions. New Year's Eve celebrations in London's Trafalgar Square have been cancelled in the interests of public safety. While New Zealand on Tuesday postponed its phased reopening to international travel until the end of February at least.
In the meantime, Thailand will reinstate its mandatory COVID-19 quarantine for foreign visitors and scrap a quarantine waiver from Tuesday due to concerns over the spread of the Omicron variant of the coronavirus. The decision to halt Thailand's test and go waiver means visitors will have to undergo hotel quarantine, which ranges between 7 and 10 days. Meanwhile, a so-called sandbox program, which requires visitors to remain in a specific location but allows them free movement outside of their accommodation, will also be suspended in all places except for the tourist resort island of Phuket. The announcement came a day after Thailand reported the first case of local transmission of the Omicron variant. It also came weeks after Thailand reopened to foreign visitors in November, ending nearly 18 months of strict entry policies that contributed to a collapse in tourism, a key industry and economic driver that drew 40 million visitors in 2019. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Scott Morrison stressed that Australia must move past the heavy hand of government and authorities must stop shutting down people's lives with COVID-19 lockdowns. COVID-19 cases have been breaking records over the last several days, the surge fueled by the more transmissible Omicron variant, but Morrison insisted that limiting the spread of the virus comes down to personal responsibility.
Yes, we're going to need to continue to calibrate how we manage this virus and how we live with this virus in the face of Omicron. Of course that is necessary, but we're not going back to lockdowns. We're not going back to shutting down people's lives. We're going forward to live with this virus with common sense and responsibility.
Swift lockdowns and strict social distancing rules have helped Australia to keep its COVID-19 numbers relatively low at around 260,000 total cases and 2,154 deaths. However, most of the country has been reopening over the last few weeks after higher inoculations despite the threat from the Omicron variant. Authorities are aiming to ramp up the rollout of booster shots, with Morrison urging states to reopen hundreds of immunisation hubs shut down after demand slowed when double-dose rates in people above 16 years topped 80%. Sports football, the English Premier League, Manchester United are nearing the signing of Boubacar Kamara, having agreed personal terms with the Marseille midfielder. According to reports, a fee of around $13.5 million has been struck with Marseille, and that Kamara will become the first signing of Rangnick. The 22-year-old will likely prove a smart addition to United's midfield. Blessed with huge energy, a good passing range and strong in the tackle, he has truly caught the eye for Marseille this season. He is comfortable as part of a double midfield pivot Rangnick prefers and may prove an upgrade on the ageing Nemanja Matic. Competing with Fred and Scott McTominay, Kamara will undoubtedly strengthen United's engine room. He is expected to sign a 3.5-year deal on a contract to summer 2025. And that's all for Nightline this time around. In the spirit of Keluarga Malaysia, thousands were out in force to lend a hand to those affected by the catastrophic floods. And that includes officers from the Kuala Lumpur Road and Transport Department, JPJKL, who helped clean up houses of their fellow officers. Led by its director, Muhammad Zaki Ismail, and Enforcement Chief, Ahmad Kamaruzaman Mihat, 30 officers lent their helping hands in the cleanup of 15 flood-damaged homes in Gombak, Karak, Jendram and Dengkil. JPJKL also donated basic necessities such as rice, flour, sugar and dried foods to the affected officers. Now, this short clip best describes Malaysians caring for Malaysians. I'm Norzie. Stay safe, everyone.